All right, guys, thank you for joining for today's resume review session. We have back Brian Ross, Senior Manager of Talent Acquisition at Visa Verifi. And as last time, we're gonna review several resumes. Also, Brian, we're gonna have a talk, and we touched this a little bit last time about salary negotiations and offers. If you could give a few tips and hints there too. Let's keep it to the end. This is like the cherry on top.
Just like I said last time with the hiring managers, I'm their Sherpa. So you'll be my Sherpa this time.
Yes, I will. Awesome. Before we go into the resumes, I have a couple questions to cover about Brian when you have a conversation with the first initial call with candidates. When you review their resumes, you think, okay, this candidate worth to talk. You send him an invite or a first email, and then you have initial call. So, Brian, what are you looking during this initial call? What are you paying attention on the candidate?
Yeah. No, that's a great question, Evgeny. And again, it's really going to depend on the position, right? In my conversation with the hiring manager, I think as I discussed the last time I was on, just how I go about meeting with the hiring manager and doing what I call a position intake meeting with the hiring manager, understanding what are the must-have skills, right? The things that we cannot compromise on, that we need candidates to bring to the skills we need candidates to bring to the table regardless, right? These are must-have minimum requirements, right? Those terms in my mind are interchangeable. And then, of course, the things that are really going to, the preferred skills that are going to get that are going to make that candidate stick out even more, right, to the hiring manager. But when I go through that process, we're also discussing screening questions that I'm going to ask, right? And these are going to be maybe like 2 to 3 questions that I'm going to further qualify the candidate so that, yes, on paper, look like you have what we need, right? But now I need to ask you some questions that the hiring manager and I talked about to understand, do you have the extent of the experience that we need? So I can give an example, right? If we're talking about software test engineers. So one of the questions I would ask is, tell me about your experience automating testing. And so what I'd be looking for, because the hiring manager wants somebody with a background, maybe programming, right? A programming background. So what I'm looking for in that answer is for that person to tell me, okay, what I do is first manually test the application to understand what I can automate and what I can't automate, right? And then my process in automating is I will make, and again, I'm just making this up. So for all you technical folk, please understand, I know I'm not technical. I don't try to be, right? I'm just making this up as I go. They tell me, okay, I'm using Selenium WebDriver with Java programming to write a script to automate this testing, right? So boom, the light bulb goes off in my head. Okay, great. They said the magic words, writing test scripts in Java to automate the testing, right? So that tells me that they can program, or at least program enough to write scripts, right? But if it's not like lines and lines of code, at least they can write some code. So again, I use that example, but my point being, it gives me the opportunity to further vet them out for the things that the hiring manager is looking for based on that conversation that I had initially with the hiring manager.
Yeah, so again, obviously you have hard requirements that hiring managers bringing and asking you, this is something that I really need. And you definitely do these check marks against those requirements. But then what other things that you are like targeting for? Actually, let me ask another way. What are the most common mistakes candidates are doing during the interview?
When I'm screening them?
Yes, with you.
I would think probably the most common mistakes are trying to fluff an answer where they just don't have the experience, instead of just admitting it, instead of just being upfront and saying, I don't have that experience. I don't do any programming. I don't know how to program. I do the automated testing, but somebody else writes the script. I figure out what to automate, but somebody else writes the scripts for me, right? Because I've had that happen before, where I have to then clarify because I heard something that didn't quite sound right. So then I followed up with the question saying, so just to make sure I understand, are you writing the scripts from scratch or is somebody else? Oh, the developer. I work with the developer or software engineer who's writing that. So I think that's the biggest thing, is making sure. That's the biggest mistake they can make, because what's then going to happen is they're not going to be upfront with me. I'm going to write that note. I'm going to send it over to the hiring manager. Hiring manager is going to be like, okay, that's great. I want to talk to them. And they may make it past the hiring manager. But then when they get to the technical piece of it and they have to actually show how they would, you went through the interview process with us, right?
Yes, I did.
You had to whiteboard and show how you were going to write a test script, right? Using a programming language to automate to automate the testing of that part of the application. So at some point it's going to come out. And it's never a good look when you get to that point of the interview process, because then the interviewer and the hiring manager and the recruiter are like, wow, you just wasted all of our time. And do you think we're going to probably want to revisit that candidate in the future? Most likely not. Right. So I would say that's the biggest mistake I've seen folks make, is just not being upfront about their experience and their skills.
Yeah, I think this is the most common as well. I think this is the most common mistakes and the hard one. But at the same time, I think we also covered this a little bit on the previous session. But for the newbies, like I know this is the most toughest thing to get the first job.
Yep.
I love this analogy, like that a rich person said, don't ask me how I made my first million. I will tell you how I did that for fortune. But don't ask me how I made the first, the first hardest part. The same thing with the first job. What would be your advice to people who is transitioning or with gaps in their resumes? So this is two things, right? Different gaps and transitioning. Let's touch the transitioning first. What would be your advice for people who want to be a software test engineer, for example? They went through, I don't know, or coding bootcamp, or they went back to school. They don't have necessarily the experience that hiring managers, most of them looking. And I know this is like the topic, very hot topic to discuss. And I think a lot of people trying to figure it out. What would be your input?
I think for somebody who's making that transition, and again, I want to acknowledge the fact that it is challenging, right? It's not an easy thing to do. Transitioning to any new profession, right? I think I told my story last session we had, right? Of going from social work to recruiter. I went from in a job, career, master's degree, to then taking an entry-level role, right? Started at the bottom, worked my way back up, right?
Yeah.
And I did that at age 30, 32, 31, 32, right? So again, I know how challenging it is. I've done it myself. But I think when it comes to technology, right, or tech type roles and somebody making that transition, I agree. I think if you don't have that comp sci degree background, right, like maybe you were in client support or a customer service role, but you're like, hey, I'm really into technology, I want to make that transition. I agree 100%. I think as opposed to going back to school and getting a comp sci degree and spending all that time, go look at these boot camps, right, where you can learn. But I think the other piece of it is maybe show what you can do through your GitHub account, your Stack Overflow, right? Like some of those types of websites that are out there where you can actually showcase Like, hey, I get it. I might not have these years of experience as a software engineer or a software test engineer, but this is this is the skills that I have under my belt right now, and I can show you through my GitHub account, or I can show you through my Stack Overflow account where I'm working on projects or helping folks solve coding problems, right? Or developing my own little applications just to sharpen my skills and practice my coding skills. So I think that's where you're really going to need to leverage those types of things to help supplement and fill in those gaps.
Yep. Does it apply also for candidates with the gaps in their resume?
So when you mean gaps, are you talking about time frame gaps?
Time frame gaps, yeah.
Yeah, I think this is going to be up to the individual, but I think what I'm starting to see on LinkedIn, I'll put it this way. What I'm starting to see on LinkedIn profiles is people putting career break for whatever reason, right? However, I will say after 2020, I'm the type of recruiter that understands we went through a pandemic, right? People lost their jobs, which is unfortunate. And even right now, as companies are laying off, right? So I think it depends on the recruiter. It's going to come down to, are you working with a recruiter who gets it? Or are you working with a recruiter who's like, why do you have these gaps on your resume? And it's, come on, like, really? It was 2020. Why do you think there was a gap? So I think it depends. But if we're talking about gaps before the pandemic, I think it's just important to be ready to talk about that, because I'm the type of recruiter, I'm going to ask you. If I see, okay, you have a position that you had from, let's just say 2015 to 2018, but then all of a sudden you're back working again in 2020, I'm going to say, what was going on during those 2 years? Because then I want to be able to explain that to the hiring manager when I submit them over, and say, and as part of my note, and say, from this time to this time, this is what was going on. Oh, they started a family and decided to stay at home with the kid, or they had a sick parent or a sick family member that they had to take care of, right? We all have lives, right? We all have things that are going on in our personal lives outside of our professional lives. And so I think really what it comes down to is just be honest and upfront, or as comfortable as you feel being honest and upfront, right? But I would say just be upfront about that stuff from the get-go, right?
Yeah.
And then however you want to put it on your resume, that's really up to you. If you want to explain that gap, then just be upfront about whatever was going on during that time. But if it's like a 3-month, 4-month, 5-month gap, that's going to be up to them if they really want to discuss that. I have a gap on mine from December 2015 to when I got the job at Verifi, March 2016. So there was a gap, but that's when I was transitioning from one job to another. I unfortunately lost that job and didn't have another one lined up. And that happens. Right?
That happens. That happens.
So like I said, biggest thing is just be upfront, be honest. If asked about it, be honest. And if you're concerned about wanting to get ahead of it, right, then put it on your resume. From this time to this time, this is what I was doing.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. I think I have another question, but I think we're gonna talk about
sorry, one quick thing that I wanted to add, because I didn't want to make it all about the screening questions during the screen. I also wanted to add, I talk about location, where they're at, right? Especially if it's hybrid role and we expect them to be in the office. Is that going to be a realistic commute? I'm going to challenge you if it's over 20 miles, because I wouldn't be doing an over 20-mile commute, so I wouldn't expect anybody else to over 20 miles one way. So I'm gonna push you on that, right? And then on the comp piece, which I know we're gonna talk about a little bit later, so I'll save my rant for later. But those other two things I think are very important too to cover during my call also.
Totally. Yeah, 100%. We're gonna keep it to the end. And a little spoiler. Next session, Brian, I think it's great to cover when the person should switch the jobs, when the person you think, and I think, stayed too long in the company, where it's actually not beneficial for him, but actually maybe more hurtful. So I think
I think you're right. That is a whole nother topic with
this. Yeah, that is very interesting.
But a good topic to cover, Yevgeny. A good topic to cover for sure.
Yeah, about the balancing. All right, awesome.
Yeah.
Let's get started with the resumes. And before we're gonna start, I wanna do announcement, guys. On April 29th, we're going to start the second batch of mock interviews session. This is a very limited group. We're gonna be limited up to 30 people. And we have a total 3 hiring managers who will be hosting these mock interviews, including from former engineering manager from Google, of engineering at another big tech company. And we have also former Google engineer who will be doing the mock interviews technical. He solved over 1,000 of lead code problems. And another spoiler, he will be doing the free event. It's going to be next Saturday. We're going to do a coverage of how you're going to tackle the lead code problems, including the mock interviews. If you want to try yourself, please join next Saturday. And 29th, the same link is applied. Join us to crushinginterview.com and you will see there. Anyway, let's get started with a resume candidate number 1. We'll call it candidate number 1. I'll put it, share screen here. We need your background.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Thank you.
Awesome. First of all, am I pronouncing your name correctly? Can you?
Yes.
Kazui?
Yeah, my name is Kazue.
Kazue.
Yeah,
Kazue.
All right. Guys.
All right. Kazue, please.
Nice to meet you, Kazue.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Can you give us what kind of, from your resume, I think you are targeting for testing positions, right?
Yes.
Specifically QA automation, SDET.
QA. Yeah, I like to find an automation job if possible. So I've been doing QA for a long time, about 16, 17 years. And half of my career is mostly like manual QA engineer. And then last 7 years, I've been started doing like more coding and more automation. And yeah, I'm hoping to find an automation job. I was laid off last year, about August, and I've been looking for full-time job for a while now, and it's been difficult. So yeah, I like to improve my resume, and I like to improve on my interview skills, and yeah, this is very helpful.
Got it.
Yeah.
First of all, I can tell you have very interesting and impressive background and experience. I can see it throughout I like your resume.
Thank you.
I like your resume. Question though, what does this mean? QA tester, freelance part-time?
Oh yeah, so after I got laid off, just try to, I'm doing like a freelance tester. It doesn't take much of time and yeah, just try to.
Is it project based? So like you have, okay.
Yeah, it's a project based. It's not, I only work maybe 1 week a month or so it's very small. It's very easy. It's mostly checking UI on the website and the mobile applications. Yeah, it's very, so maybe I should put that.
Sorry, Kuzue, are you able to talk about who you're working with? Or
the Hogas is the company, and they have a client that I So the freelance QAs work on those projects, and I'm not allowed to say the client name.
Okay. Can you talk about though, so do you see how like in your experience, in your positions at Creative Live and Kixeye, how you really dove into what you were doing there? I think it would be helpful for you to do the same with Hogarth, because just looking at that one, like that line's not going to stand out to anyone.
Okay. Maybe I shouldn't put that there. I have that on my LinkedIn.
No, I think you want to show what you're doing. If you are doing testing now, I think you want to show what you're doing. But I think it's going to be more beneficial for you to talk about. So this is one of the things that I talked about last session is in each of your experiences, you want to make sure you're capturing what did you do, how did you do it, and what was the result, if you can talk about the result. So you're saying UI and functional testing for web and mobile applications, but can you talk a little bit more about what did you use to do the UI and functional testing? What were these web and mobile applications? Did it speed up any time in using the application? Did it make the application more efficient? What was the result of the testing on the application? Like, how did it make the applications better?
Yeah.
If that's the case, right? And I agree with Yevgeny. I think the content you have under your positions is good content. What I would recommend, though, is setting it up more in a bullet point format, because it's going to be a little bit easier to read on the eyes.
Okay.
Okay.
That's a good point. Yeah. Points.
And I would also recommend not having the split between you have information on one side and then your experience on another side. And the reason for that is applicant tracking systems, it's going to confuse the ATS.
Okay.
When it parses your resume. So what I recommend you do is moving that skills section maybe up to the top and breaking it down by category. So like programming languages, databases, testing tools, continuous integration, continuous delivery tools, bug tracking, breaking it down like that. I think, at least for me, I think it would be more appealing on the eyes. Now, granted, again, I'm a little bit more experienced recruiter, so I can read through some of this stuff. But you have to imagine, you have to say to yourself, and I would say this to any job seeker, you want to make this readable for anybody who's maybe a first-year entry-level recruiter all the way to an experienced recruiter. So an inexperienced recruiter might not be able to pick up on, is HTML a programming language? Is this a database? Like, you really want to make it, and I use this term, and I hope it doesn't, and I'm not trying to offend anyone by using it, but you want to make it simple, stupid. Okay.
Yeah, that's a really good advice. I'm gonna. Yeah. Now I realize it's hard to read.
And that's the thing. And you can still say the stuff you're saying, like under Creative Live, like you could say, as the first QA engineer, you built the QA process from scratch. I don't know if you need to say you as the first QA engineer. I'm impressed enough by the fact that you built the QA process from scratch. Okay. I don't think it matters whether you're the first, second, third, fourth, 100th QA engineer. You still built that QA process from scratch, right?
Yeah.
And I think you also want to, again, make sure that you're keeping more of the technical stuff more towards the top. So when you say you wrote and maintained end-to-end UI automation tests using Protractor, Selenium-based, and later Cypress, and set up the run the tests as part of the CI process in Jenkins, were you using a programming language while you were doing the end-to-end UI automation?
Yes. Yeah. JavaScript,
right?
Yeah. So I should mention that.
I was going to ask you, do you see JavaScript mentioned in there?
No, good point. Yeah.
So again, I think don't sell yourself short, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what you're doing by not putting that in there.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Because remember, like you want to show them, this is what I did, this is what I used to do it, this is how I did it, or how I did it, or what I used to do it, which is usually the tools. So the what you did was you wrote and maintained end-to-end UI automation tests, right? That's what you did. How did you do it? You use Protractor and JavaScript. But what I would also talk about too is, and I'm gonna guess that you're meaning that you were doing this for the streaming educational video products, right?
Yes.
So maybe just tie all that together. Like I would say wrote and maintained end-to-end UI automation test for the streaming educational video products. So it's all about how you word that. But I think if you do that for all of your experiences, that'll really elevate this resume. That, again, I agree with Yevgeny, I think is solid. I think you just need to sprinkle a little magic on it.
Okay. Yeah.
By doing those things. And I think if you do those things, it'll be more visually appealing and it will stick out.
Okay. So you mentioned putting into bullet points, right? And does it matter if the order matters? Do they need to be like chronologically ordered, or should I just put some more appealing things at the top?
Yeah, it doesn't have to. There's no chronologically for the bullets that, like, I wouldn't worry about that.
Okay.
What I you do is I recommend that you talk about, again, what did you do, how did you do it, with what tools, and what was the result. And I think if you put that right off the bat, because right now I'm seeing that you wrote and maintained the end-to-end UI automation test, that piece, it's in the middle.
Yeah.
And if I'm you, I want to showcase that right off the bat, because if you're applying to a software, a test engineer role or a QA engineer role, right, that's asking for somebody who has a background in testing UI and using, and they're looking for somebody experienced with writing test scripts in JavaScript, I'm gonna want to put that right off the bat so that whoever's reviewing my resume is like, okay, boom.
Okay.
They got that.
Okay. I'll do that.
Okay.
Yeah, sounds great.
I have a question, Kazuya.
Thank you.
You've been in the job search since August 22nd.
Yes. Yeah.
Why it took you so long? Like, what happened?
So the layoff happened at the end of July last year, and then I took a couple of months off. I went to Japan, that's where I'm from. And then I came back and I started seriously looking for a job about October. So I've been looking for a job since October. Yeah, that's how many months. And
so it's been about 7 months.
Yeah, and their holidays, so there was some slowing down. But
what are some of the challenges that you've experienced, like, as far as, are you getting interviews? Have you gotten any offers? Just maybe they didn't line up, or?
I haven't gotten any offer, but I went really close to it with one company, but the position got paused at the company, so that was unfortunate. And yeah, I have some interviews, but yeah, I failed. Yeah, for some companies, I failed like a second round, third round, and yeah, it's very difficult.
Not like you didn't get past the technical, like some of the technical portions?
At the beginning, yeah, like when I started, I failed at the coding tests, and that was October, November. And then I started studying at the same time. So yeah, I became better with that. And so I started passing technical parts these days. But still, I think after the New Year's, especially February, March, the kind of the number of interviews I'm getting is started to roll down, decrease.
Oh, recently you're saying the number of interviews has been decreasing.
Yeah.
Got it.
I was wondering if that's because the job market was, I don't know. Yeah, so first thing I thought about, maybe I should improve on my resume. And
That's where it starts. Like
yeah,
that's the first impression people are going to get of you, right?
okay.
So that's where you're really getting your foot in the door is
Yeah.
with the resume. And I would also make sure, like you said, that your LinkedIn profile also reflects your resume too. Like I would just make it a mirror copy
Yeah, copy.
to
Okay.
a certain extent of your resume so that people who are going out there and actually doing headhunting and searching for folks that have your type of background that go up in their search.
Yeah.
My, yeah, 100% agree with what Brian said. And I think you should, out of this conversation, the most important, I think, that Brian said, you, how do you say, underestimating yourself. Because, first of all,
Selling yourself short.
selling yourself short, exactly. You need to wrap it up nicely. I see you have, and even title. Your title is senior QA engineer, but actually from your description, as I see, you was doing heavily automation.
Right.
Did you?
Not 100%. Actually, I was doing maybe 50% of my time doing automation.
50% is already, it is good enough.
Okay.
It's up to you. You can put it like senior you can put QA automation engineer. It will definitely increases your possibility to get more interviews. And I think you would be qualified if you would put QA automation engineer. Yeah, you can keep it as a senior QA engineer. There's nothing wrong with this. But my biggest concern would be this line.
Okay.
The QA tester, freelance, part-time, it's actually removing all your previous experience. And it makes sense if you start with being a QA tester and then you evolving, but you need to think through like how you want to tackle this line and present it more nicely. Like it's very similar. You would say, I was a great engineer, QA automation, and then it's like a shifting down, basically.
Is it better not to put that because I don't have to put that? Like
there's few things that you can do. I'll leave it to you, like how you want to do this, because one way, again, I don't want you that my advice will affect you in this way, because you need to think through like how you want to do. I can tell you like this thing, it doesn't present you in a good way.
yeah, it doesn't contribute to my career.
Not at all. It's actually damaging more.
That's not what I want to do for my next career. So.
It's almost like you're going backwards.
Correct.
Right, yeah, regression. Right. Yeah.
Correct. Another thing.
And sorry, and like Yevgeny said, you don't need to. Like me as a recruiter, like you doing that freelance part-time is neither here nor there to me. And again, Yevgeny said, I think that just creates more questions.
I agree.
I'm not saying you don't want to be truthful, because if somebody were to ask and say, hey, tell me about this role, then you can be upfront about it and say, look, I'm doing it part-time right now until I find a full-time job, but a full-time role. But it sounds like you're doing more than just, like, again, you're selling yourself short by just saying UI and functional testing for web and mobile applications, where you're not selling yourself short in your creative live experience, what you wrote there, or in Kickseye. Like you got to go into that same detail, or as much as you can for that.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I put it because just I didn't want to look like I have so many time to
understand this, but sometimes it's better not to put it at all rather than put it.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
I think
this
I remove that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this is
and
the
you're
case.
not lying. You're not lying because if somebody
Right.
were to ask you, you're going to be upfront about it, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, too, like Yevgeny said, with titles, I'll be honest, like to a certain extent, I don't really look at titles, but when you see QA, when you're in software test and you know about that profession, when you see QA tester, that does come with some assumptions.
Not very yeah.
I'll put it
That's
that
true.
way,
That's
right?
true. I agree. I totally agree. Yeah. Okay. I'll
Yeah.
do it. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
Because
You're
it's
welcome.
not, and again, it sounds like you're doing very similar to what you were doing in your previous roles, right? Like I would even say at Kixeye, like even though that was your title, QA analyst, like you're writing Python scripts. And if you're writing those from scratch to test the data flow end to end, I think it's okay to put engineer instead of analyst.
Yeah, but do they need to be official title? That those are the title of the company.
No, because people call what I see recruiters call themselves purple squirrel hunters.
Okay.
I don't even know what that is, but they call themselves that. It's real, but again, you want that to pop. You want it to pop. Nobody's gonna go back and be like, "Hey, Kixeye was Kuzue, you know, what were they a QA analyst or a QA engineer?" Like they're gonna look at what you actually did, right?
Yeah.
But that QA analyst title is gonna come with assumptions too.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Exactly.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the last thing on the resume, I think reference available upon the request, you can remove it. It's
Don't need it.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't need it. And English, you are fluent English, so it's also like is a given. You don't need to mention that too.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you. It was really
The only thing that I can invite you, I think I should invite you to our mock interview sessions that we are going to do for the full month, because if you in a job search for 7 months, it says to me that you was doing something wrong. Yes, market sucks. Market right now is the worst market for the last 10 years. This is the fact. And everyone is suffering, including yourself, myself, and everyone else. But at the same time, within 7 months, it says a lot. So you need to change your approach with the interviewing. You need to change with the resume.
Yeah.
And please join us. Join us.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I will. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's move with the second resume. Satar,
Can you hear me?
we can hear you. How are you?
Yes, hi Satar.
Hey, nice to meet you guys.
Nice to meet you.
So
Tell us what's your background? What are you looking for?
okay, so before COVID started, at that moment, I got involved in another job. And after 3 months, there was a lot of internal problems. So we were sent on to home. And that continued for a while with other project with a less amount of salary. And I lost like experience, let's say. It was a time break. And afterwards, the projects which are provided now are what I really want. And that's why I'm trying to find a new job position as a software developer. And I didn't do a comprehensive background search in the market, to be honest. Just wanted to prepare my CV and get back about some fields are missed or better to be replaced, or like the previous speaker as well. Yeah.
And just to confirm, Satar, you're here in the US now?
No, I'm in Germany.
Oh, you are in Germany. Okay.
Yeah, but forget about the market in US, fairly speaking. I just
That's why I asked, just to make sure, so I'm not giving any advice for US market that doesn't apply.
Yeah, to be honest, I worked in my career with the US remotely in the past.
For sure.
Yeah, but time zones killed me, so I decided to be a little bit skeptic about it, because I was working 2 a.m. till 10 a.m. in German time, only nights, because of the time zones, and that was horrible.
Thanks, yeah. I was gonna ask you to zoom in a little bit.
Yeah.
So real quick, that I wanted to ask Satar was just about, because again, I haven't done much recruiting in Germany, so I'm not really sure how recruiters in Germany go about reviewing resumes. But I guess before we dive in, like, what, if any, success have you had so far, or what has been your experience so far using this resume?
So from 10, I applied 10 times in the past, let's say it, last year. And I got called at least 4 times to the first, to the first round of the interview. And afterwards it was rejected. So then the 50% went off, and then only 2 of them I passed to the second coding interview. And afterwards there was some situation. I think one was the salary information, which was not fitting to my requirements, which they were providing. And another one was the visa problems I had with them. So I had to cancel. But as I said, 4 out of 10 was fine.
So it sounds like you feel like you've had some success with this resume then.
Yes, but as I said, I didn't update this resume since 2020. And I don't know how much, what is good to have here. What is this better to remove?
Yeah, so I would say right off the bat, and sorry, Evgeny, can you just scroll all the way to the end? I just wanted to see where, yeah, got it. All right. I think that skills section should be at the top.
Oh, okay.
Okay, because the way that resume, I like a clean flow in a resume as a recruiter. And so to me, there's a linear flow to it, to where it's okay. You got the person's name, their contact information, maybe a link to their LinkedIn profile, or any GitHub account, or Stack Overflow, code repo stuff, if that stuff's applicable, and then go into the skills, because then I'm like, okay, so Sitar, these are his tech skills. Now, how and where did he use these things? Yeah. And then that's when you're going to go into that piece. So like, for example, like you wrote, right? Development of an API based on Quarkus and integration into I've never even heard of this stuff, but Kambuta engine using REST architecture as part of a microservice architecture. I would I might not have that be my lead bullet point, just because it is very technical.
Oh, okay.
What I might do is I might put that as my third bullet point, because I think like development of an online front desk and waiting room, I would say waiting room application for a hospital, or developing or developed using Spring Boot and Angular technologies. What was the actual language? Was it Java?
Yeah, it is Java.
Right. So I would spell that out. I would say using Java, Spring Boot, and Angular, framework.
TypeScript, sorry. Yeah.
Or whatever language, right? Whatever language you use. So I would just flesh it out a little bit more, right? Like I was telling the person before you, right? What did you do? How did you do it? And when I say how did you do it, what tools did you use? What languages, right?
Sure.
And then what was the result? What was the result of you developing this online front desk and waiting room application for the hospital? How did that impact the business?
They're working on it now.
How do they want it to impact the business? Why are you doing this? You're not doing it just to do it. Why do they want this done? Is it to be more efficient? Is it to get people through the waiting through the hospital?
No, this project was developed in the COVID times. And in order to avoid the direct contact with the personnel there, the task came that we want to develop some online form as a basic standing screen that people who has appointments can come and click and find themselves.
Okay.
And in order to minimize the contact with the personnel and them not to become COVID positive, the hospital asked for this tool. That was the task.
So I would try to summarize that as best as you can, because that's why you're doing it, right? So again, if I'm a recruiter and I'm trying to understand the story that you're telling, I'm going to ask myself, okay, what did this application do? What was the point? Why were they developing it?
Okay. Yeah, I will add. I'll add
Because
to
that's
it.
always, from a technology standpoint, what I've learned in my experience and in my career, and especially now working for Visa, right? Working for a large corporation like Visa, is it all comes down to how is this helping generate revenue, right? And if you can connect all those dots, like that's what's going to stand out to a recruiter. That's what's going to stand out to a hiring manager of saying, okay, Satar developed this application to get people through this process more efficiently without them having to have human contact, risking exposure to potential the COVID virus.
Yeah, but okay.
So again, better than I do. My point just is like, connect the dots for the reader. Don't make them have to connect the dots themselves.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Less technical, that makes sense.
Yeah. Not necessarily less technical, but more in layman's terms.
Okay.
There's a balance between the two.
Definitely, because definitely, as Brian said, your resume will be reading by hiring managers who are technical, and they can be engineering managers, CTOs, or whatever, and also by recruiters who are less technical. And you have two audience at least, so put it all together.
Sure.
It should not be less technical. It should be for both, like with technical.
The funny story, once I had this interview where the guy ignored my CV because I didn't write Java and he was looking for Java developer and I wrote Spring Boot developer. It's basically written on implemented in Java, and the HR just ignored my CV.
Yes.
Exactly.
I
that
know
was
this
probably
background.
a hard lesson to learn, Satar.
I got that information because my past colleague was working in that company, and when I applied, he forwarded my CV to the HR department, and then he was quite surprised after he asked why was the reason of that. He said he couldn't find Java in the last projects. Yeah, I'm aware of that part. That's a bullet point in my CV. Also try to generalize at least the language which is these frameworks are built on.
Yeah, because that's the thing, right? Like Spring, if I look at, I know Spring Root, Spring Batch, MVC, right?
That's a huge environment.
I don't know what they do, but I know their frameworks, right?
Sure.
And I know that they're most likely Java frameworks. So somebody like myself who's been doing this for a while could probably infer that you are using Java based on the frameworks you're discussing. But this is somebody who's been looking at this stuff for 10 plus years, right?
Yeah.
You want to make it so somebody who's been looking, maybe hasn't even been looking at this stuff for a year, can say, okay, he's got Java because I see he's got Java, right? So you just, again, like I said to the person before you got to make it simple, stupid, right?
Yeah.
Don't assume that they know.
Exactly. And I think, and I'm glad you brought up that example, because trust me, I know for a fact you are not the only one who has experienced that, where you've been like, wait, what do you mean I don't have Java? It's pretty clear that I'm a Java developer.
Yeah.
But it wasn't clear to that person.
Yeah, that was
not clear to me.
It wasn't clear to the person that is the gatekeeper that was gonna unlock the door for you to walk through.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they kept the door locked because they didn't know that they couldn't put it all together. But I would say other than that, definitely move the skills part to the top for sure. I like how you have the bullets. I like how you have the dates, your title. I know the company name's blacked out, but I'm assuming that's the company name, right?
Yeah, correctly. And the bottom black is the contact information as well, the GitHub account number, and big black box. It's tech file, to be honest. I don't know if it rings any bell.
So as far as those courses go, Yevgeny,
That was my
maybe you
free
could-
time.
yeah, I was gonna say maybe you want to chime in on this, but I'm not sure if you need to list all those.
Okay.
This stuff
Fair
says more than your courses.
And you look at the education, right? If you go
Yeah.
back up top, Yevgeny, it's very clear that you have a comp sci background.
Yeah, but after COVID, it was quite hard, so I just
I
took a
totally
lot
hear
of
you.
courses.
I totally hear you. Trying to do something different and
Yeah,
see if
exactly.
anything happens. But again, I really don't think that. So again, this is just me. If I was the recruiter looking at this, I would be like, okay, that's nice that he has these courses, but I'm not making a decision based on that. I'm making a decision on reaching out to him based on what Yevgeny just said, your experience, what you wrote under each job and your experience.
Yeah, but Java certification will be added here.
Yeah,
yeah,
and again, that's also personal preference, right? If you wanna make sure they know that you're certified in Java and that's important to you, then that's important to you. I'm just letting you know from a recruiting perspective, that doesn't change whether or not, like, that's not a make it or break it for me as a recruiter.
Oh, okay.
Like, I'm going to talk to somebody who doesn't have Java certification, and I'm going to talk to somebody who does, but I'm talking to them because they developed RESTful web applications and APIs in Java.
Oh, okay.
That's it.
Okay.
That's why I want to talk to them.
Yeah, then this exam, which I was planning, is more to me rather than to the CV.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, I can only speak for me. There might be other people out there who feel differently. Yevgeny, you've worked with more recently with more hiring managers than I have. So I don't know. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on how have managers said anything to you about certifications. And again, might be more popular in Germany versus the US. So we
Yeah,
have to take that into account, Satar.
Yeah, but that certification is international as far as I know.
I'm just saying
Oracle.
what might be important, like to hiring managers in Germany,
Okay.
might not be the same here in the US. You have to
Yeah.
account for the cultural nuances,
Yeah,
how different countries do.
Yeah,
sure.
I totally agree, Brian. Because, for example, for some reason, it's very popular in Europe and India. They asking for testers like ISTQB.
I see it all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
right?
Which in the United States is like nobody cares.
Right.
Nobody
Okay.
cares. And not only nobody cares, it actually can go against you. It more says, oh, he probably is just junior. He's trying to get the certificates as much as he can
That's
because
true.
he doesn't have a real experience. Yeah, there's no right or wrong answers here. If it works in Germany like that, keep it like that.
And look,
Yeah.
and if it's important to you, if you feel like, you know what, I worked really hard for this certification, I want to show that I got it, then hey, more power to you.
Yeah.
Again, personal
That's
preference.
a yes or no. I agree and disagree at the same time because the plan is to grow the self-confidence because
Right.
of the passive projects in the past. And yeah, that can significantly improve the confidence level when I will pass that crazy exam, which I'm trying.
Right.
Yeah, if it helps.
But that's but again, just even looking at, just real quick, while we're looking at the web developer experience, right? I noticed that you wrote technology used PHP, Cake, Angular, and MySQL and WordPress. The only two that I see listed in those bullets are Angular and WordPress, right?
Yeah,
So I think
the one above higher.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the 2016 to 2017. Because you're listing those so to me, I would say,
Okay.
where did he use PHP, Cake, and MySQL? Where do those fit into here?
Sure. Got it. Yeah, we'll fix that
So,
part.
well, I would say so again, I don't know if this is the style in Germany or this has been working for you.
Hardly.
And so again, I just want to preface that, but I just don't know if you need that bullet saying technologies and listing them out. I think you're going to be better served talking about those technologies and what you did with them within those other bullets, as opposed to having a bullet that just lists the technology, because it is a bit repetitive, right?
Yeah.
But
Thank you.
other than that, I feel like you've done a good job capturing the what, the how. I think you just need to tighten it up a little bit on some of these bullets and figure out how to connect the dots a little bit more with them, like we talked.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, great. Yeah, thanks
All
for
right.
that.
Thank you, Satar. Thank you.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Satar.
thank you guys a lot. Thanks for the time.
Yeah, good luck.
Thanks.
And thanks for joining us, because I know it's late out there in Germany.
It's 4 a.m.
I'd still be sleeping. Bless you for showing up at this time.
One thing I can add, just you need to apply more than 10 times, because I think you have a great outcome. Actually, if you apply 10 times and you got 4 interviews,
That's 40%.
That's
good.
40%. Usually it's 5-10%.
Yeah.
But
I will be honest with you guys. This is the CV which, okay, so originally when I'm applying, I have a GitHub pages with the online version of the CV, and I put the tracker inside of it. I mean, tracker of the location, and I can check if the CV was located. Can you hear me?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
and in that HTML file, I uploaded also the PDF version of the CV, which your guys are looking. So from that perspective, I know how many companies took a look from what region. The Google Analytics, the script which is provided, he can tell you how many times the link was opened and so on further. And I use that in order to view how many people opened and from which location they opened the CV, and therefore I know the statistics. Yeah, but when I'm sending
And I'm sure
PDF,
that helps.
indeed, that's the statistics I'm talking about. When the recruiter is asking for the PDF and he doesn't want the HTML, the GitHub page, so the PDF is also inside of that GitHub page. You can automatically download it. This is the PDF I'm sending to you. At the moment, currently, I have to duplicate two stuff, the online one and this PDF, due to the feedback I have, which is 1 or 2 hours job to do. But yeah, great, really helpful for the feedback. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Awesome,
Satar.
Satar.
Yeah, have a good one.
Yeah.
Josh, are you here?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, Josh.
How's it going?
Good. Thanks for joining us.
Walk us through, like, what are you looking? What kind of positions you're looking?
Yeah. So I recently just finished up a programming bootcamp in February. And so those are the projects you see there. And I've been working in education since I graduated with my bachelor's degree. And that's where I am.
Okay, let me put it.
So that's the Coding Academy.
Yeah, I just redacted the name, but
No, totally fine. I just wanted to make sure that was how long was the Coding Academy? How long was the boot camp?
it was 24 weeks, about 6 months.
Okay. Yevgeny, what's your thoughts on putting that time frame down? Do you think that matters?
Which one?
For how long the boot camp was? Because I know there's ones for 6 weeks, but I've never heard this one. 24 weeks sounds like pretty intense.
24 weeks. It's
24.
like it's 6 months.
Yeah.
Actually, 6 months is not too bad.
I'm just saying, if it were a 6 week, I would probably recommend not putting the time frame down.
Yeah.
But I think a 24-week boot camp, to be honest, I think that's a good enough amount of time to maybe show how much time was put into it. Again, I don't know, just a thought.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Do you think it would be best to show that as like a descriptor or the timestamp that I have on the right, like the months, for example? Like I could say from August 2022 to February 2023.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I think it could help, because again, that's just going to show, because people might assume, right? People might assume and say, okay, Josh he did a boot camp, but was it one of those 6-week boot camps? Was it one of those 4-week things, 3-week things? Like, how intense was it? And I think showing that it was like a 6 month, to me, this is the first time I'm actually hearing about a 6-month boot camp, to be honest. Normally I've heard of them being like 5-6 weeks.
Yeah, it was a part-time.
Oh, okay.
It was the boot camp. The boot camp is Full Stack Academy, which is I think a pretty well-known boot camp. And their typical program is 3 months, but that's like full-time, and they spread it out over 6 months for the part-time.
Okay. Yeah. And I would honestly, I would move that up to the top along with your other education. It's really up to you if you want to have that competed in NCAA Division I athletics, because I'll be honest with you, chances are most engineering managers are probably not going to feel any which way about that, considering, and again, I'm just talking in general, most of the engineers that I've met are not the most into athletic stuff. I'll put it that way.
I could see that. It's not
Yevgeny's laughing at me because he knows I'm trying to figure out how to put this in the most way.
Yeah, it's not a relatable point, I guess is what you're saying.
My wife can hear me, so she just chimed in saying not very sporty, I guess. That might be probably the best way to describe it. So
that's fair.
But yeah, but I think putting that stuff up towards the top, and then, yeah, your situation is, like many others, is a little bit more challenging, right? That's what we just talked about in the beginning of this meetup, right? Was how do you make that transition, right? And we were talking about that. But I think you're doing everything you can in the sense of showcasing the projects you worked on. Did you have the links to like your GitHub or Stack Overflow where this stuff is listed, like where these projects are?
Yeah, so next to the projects, it would be a hyperlink.
Okay,
and
cool.
it would be blue typically, so it's like pretty indicative that you would click on it. And at the top, it would be links to my LinkedIn, the GitHub, and my personal site.
Okay. So yeah, so I would move the education. I like how you have the first part, right? You have your LinkedIn, your GitHub, a personal site, which like you said, has probably more of your project stuff on it. So it's giving recruiters and managers the opportunity to look at that. I'm going to be pretty straight up with you that the recruiters are probably not going to look at the GitHub and personal site as much as the hiring managers or interviewer team would. Only reason for that is I wouldn't look at it because I wouldn't understand what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
Just to be honest.
That's fair. Yeah.
But I think what's also going to matter is you targeting the right level of positions. I think that's what's going to be key to your success. So if you're looking at those roles that are saying we want 3-4+ year experience, that's probably not going to be you at this point.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to have to target those roles that you think, hey, can I get that interview? And so that's something that I think for you to just keep in mind when you're applying to these positions, and maybe even doing some research on the company. And I would say this to anybody, and maybe look at where their engineering team is at. Is it a more senior engineering team? Is it a more, I hate using the term junior, so I'm not going to use it. Is it a more less experienced, right? Are the folks more in that 1 to 2 to 3 year range? Or is it a mix? Do they run the gamut, right? All the way from those 1 to 2 to 3 year, all the way up to those 8+ years. So I think that'll be helpful too, is to look at the types of folks that these companies are hiring. So if you see a position, and again, I'm talking to everybody in the group too, you see a position, go in and look and see, go look at those engineers at the company in LinkedIn, click on their profiles, look, try to get a sense of where they're at, right? Now, again, it's really going to come down to the job description too. But if they tend to hire those less experienced engineers, then, chances are you might have a better shot. I would say with the technical skills to maybe break that up just a little bit further into like programming languages, databases, right? Some of the sorry, I'm totally like the code repos, right? Like things like that, I think will help, because I think when you're presenting it that way, to a certain extent, it does show how new you are to the software engineering world, right? Because most folks, like the gentleman just before you, Satar, the way he had it broken up, right, into the different subsections.
Yeah.
And I think that'll be helpful. But when we go into the projects, right? So this project you worked on, this full stack developer, right? I would probably talk about what you developed first. So like that third bullet point, develop the front end client services using React and Redo. I can never pronounce that one.
Redux. Yeah.
Redux, I know.
I've heard that before though.
It makes me think I need to account for
a French accent or something.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head. I was just going to say that. And then, so I would talk about what you developed, and again, the what, the how, and what was the outcome, right? What were you able to do within this project? And again, I know with the project, it might be a little bit trickier to connect all those dots.
Yeah.
But like the one you did right before that, developed a user-friendly product page for project using React and Material UI, right? Like you did that right off the bat. So I think it's just a matter of that. But I think the bullets sound good. There's nothing I would change in that regard. But yeah, but I would also say too, like it might help to see if you could even land like a paid internship.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. That's my goal. It's just anything to get my foot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry,
So
I didn't mean to
I'm not
talk over you,
aiming.
Josh, go ahead.
I'm not aiming for Facebook or Google. That would be great. But yeah, the first job, I just want to get my foot in the door. I have had some success with interviews, but the two companies I've actually interviewed at, in the middle of the interview process, they got put on a hiring freeze.
Yeah.
But that's
That
two
is
out
not
of,
uncommon right now, let me tell you.
yeah, that's 2 out of 200 positions I've applied for, roughly. Pretty low like interview rate, but it's a mix of getting no response and a phone call, and then it never goes anywhere after that.
And that's why I was saying that I think it might help you to look to dive a little bit deeper into the company's engineering folks, just to see who's on board right now, like as part who's on the team right now or in the department right now. And I think that'll help you set your expectations probably on how that application is going to go.
Yep, that makes sense.
All right.
But again, it's not the end all be all, right?
Yeah.
I'm just saying that's another aspect of it that you can research.
Yeah.
All right,
Cool.
let's move. Josh, thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you
Josh.
guys.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
only two things I want to add, but you don't need to reply back. It will help you, like, because you finished your bootcamp a couple months ago, but it's better if you show, did you finish your study? Did you finish your, you have to show that you are committed until now, even that you're developing something, that you're working on something. And if you're not, you should.
Yeah.
And this is what you have to show here. And I don't see it here. If I don't see it here, then other people don't see it either. Same thing that Brian said, front end, back end, a lot of redundancy there, like JavaScript, TypeScript. You don't need to do this. And if you are a developer, you should know about dry, right? Do not repeat yourself. So this is kind of not in the best way representing yourself. Overall, the structure of the resume, I like it. So yeah, just show that you are developing still and working on something else, and your study or your learning is not stopped in February 2023. This is what your resume says.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And check out other things like Stack Overflow, like other things similar to GitHub. Like, don't just limit yourself to that, because you're going to be able to network within those arenas too, right? So just don't limit yourself as far as that goes. I think the more you get involved in the software engineering community, the better.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
Just real quick, a question I had. So you think it would be beneficial if because I am working on a side project, but it's not complete. if I
You
put
should
that.
put it there.
Okay.
Let's keep it short. Yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah,
Have a
sorry,
good one.
I have to cut it off because we have one more resume to finish.
Thank you.
Asa, oh Asa, I'm sorry. Are you here? Hello? Asa?
I see him on. I wonder-
Yeah, me too. But all right, then
Oh, is
okay, then the last person would be Rohan. Okay. Let me open it up. Authorization required. I'm sorry. It's not ready to open it. Let's move to the next person. I'm sorry. And the last person, Josh Tisero. Yeah, it's working. Josh, I will make you. Are you still here? No, he dropped it. Anyway, I think, okay, we have last topic to discuss, Brian. I think we can wrap it up for today's resume review. It was already very intense, and I think it was very helpful to all. Brian, negotiations
yes.
and offers.
Yes.
Can I give like a few tips when it is appropriate to start talking about the salary? With whom? Yeah.
So first and foremost, as I mentioned, as part of my screening, I definitely cover it, right? Now, I don't lock anybody in, and I say that. I say, look, I'm not trying to lock you into anything, but I'm trying to get an idea of what your range is. And I don't care. And first of all, it's illegal that nobody should be asking you what you're currently making. That is illegal. Okay. So if any of you are getting asked that question, you don't have to ask that. You don't have to answer that question unless you feel like you want to divulge that information. That's up to you. I would recommend that you don't even talk about any of your past salary or your current salary, because that doesn't have, in my mind, that has no impact on where you're trying to get to, right? Again, all that matters is what you're targeting for your next opportunity. So I will ask that. And I've gotten a range of answers, right? Some folks will give me a range. I'll try to clarify that range, because usually folks will, like if somebody tells me I'm targeting anywhere between 120 to 150, right? Then I say, okay, so is 120 realistic for you? And they'll say, not really. And I say, okay, what's more realistic for you? And it's usually more towards that top number, right? So I would say my recommendation is to do that research, figure out what in general, try to understand what your skill set equals to in the market. But at the same time, too, you got to balance that out with your style of living, right? What you need, right? And so I think it's really important to know what your range is and what is realistic for you. Okay. And I think you also don't want to leave money on the table either, right? So one of the things you can do is you can flip it back on the recruiter and say, what range are you all working with? And if I'm asked that question, I give them the range and I tell them what we're realistically trying to target, which is usually the midpoint of the range, right? Now, if somebody is a little bit higher than that midpoint, say they're between the midpoint and the high point of the range, that doesn't count them out. But at the same time, just know you're going to need to show that why we should pay you that if we want to make you an offer. So you're going to have to be prepared to show that experience. I hate to say it, but you're going to have to I hate to put it in these terms, but you're going to have to show why you're worth what you're asking for. I've had to do it. Yevgeny's had to do it. Anybody who's accepted an offer or who was made an offer but countered back, you have to be prepared to justify why you're worth what you're saying you're worth. And if you don't, then don't be surprised if an offer is going to come in at what the company thinks you're worth. So I think it's just about it. It's about having that very transparent conversation with the recruiter. I would not have in general, I would not be having this conversation with the hiring manager during the interview. That also goes for, you don't need to be asking the hiring manager about vacation days and benefits and all that stuff. Save those questions for the recruiter. If you have the hiring manager's ear, you should be asking questions more along the lines of, what's the team dynamic like? How do y'all do your releases, right? Get an understanding of how it is being an engineer in that company, right? Leave the comp and the benefits and the vacation and all that. Leave that conversation for HR, for the recruiter. That's why we're here, to answer those questions. But again, going back to the original, the original topic of talking about compensation is, again, be transparent in what you're looking for, because at the end of the day, you don't want to go through that whole process and be made an offer and then feel like that offer was a slap in the face because you weren't upfront from the get-go. Don't answer that question with I'm negotiable. It's negotiable. Because if you run into a recruiter like me, I'm going to test you on it. And I'm going to say, okay, so you mean to tell me that if we offered you 100K, you'd be good to go? No. Okay. So it's not quite negotiable, is it? You have a range. Just say it. What's the big deal? Just say it. I think there's this mysticism, this taboo around feeling, oh my gosh, if I talk about salary in that first conversation with the recruiter, like that's going to lock me in. It's not. If you're upfront saying, look, I realistically need a role at between this range, or hey, what's your range? Okay, this is our range. Okay, that range works for me. So again, because once you get to that offer part, we're going to go back to that conversation, right? And I'm going to say, hey, when we originally spoke, this is what you told me. Is that still the same, or has anything changed? And if it's changed, then we need to talk about what that looks like, right? So I just, again, think it's really important to be transparent and upfront about that from the beginning, because again, you don't want to waste your time and you don't want to waste the company's time.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And also, it's very depends on the company. And I know with Verifi, I'll give a kudo to Brian specifically for you and for Verifi team, the culture that you established there, that you are pretty upfront. If the person, and I know this type of situations, when the person was selling short himself, he was like, but his skill level was on the top. He was like, I would be happy if I would be like 120. This is not the exact number. I'm just making it up. But for example, and you would say, dude, 120, we'll give you 140 because you're worth 140. Oh no, I think there's going to be a pressure. No, it's not the pressure. It is the market. This is what you're worth with your skills.
And we've had that happen.
Yeah.
I've had that happen a couple times where I was like, we got to pay this person more than what they're asking for because they're selling themselves. They don't know it, but they're selling themselves short.
Yeah. And I had this conversation with these guys. Dude, You just haven't oh, this is the next conversation, because this dude, he was sitting at this company for decades, like 10 over plus years. His salary was raising like 2%, 3%.
Yep.
And the market was way ahead.
Yep.
And he was afraid of to make a move. We'll talk about this in the next session.
It's a great topic. I'm telling you, this is a great topic, Yevgeny. I'm looking forward to definitely having that conversation, because I feel like right now too, especially, and I know we're a bit over time, but I just want to add this point to it, is that I know there's folks out there, again, who've been interviewing for a long time, who have to balance between, do I take this offer even though I know I'm selling myself short on it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, I'm sure we could probably dive into that too.
Definitely. Brian, thank you very much for sharing a lot of thoughtful insights. And please join us. Brian volunteered to do this like on a monthly basis. So that's going to be awesome. For those who didn't have a chance to drop their resume before or was waiting but had technical issues, join us next time. We want to help you all, but at the same time, like, we also limited.
There's only so much time in the day.
Exactly. And as I mentioned, drop your resume into Crushing Interview. We'll review it. I'll personally give you a feedback there too.
And I also wanted to say, all the folks that are still on the call, I don't know who's still on it, but feel free to drop me a connection on LinkedIn for sure. I have some good resources to help folks out with, and I'm all about giving back to the community and helping folks out, period. So no worries there. But yeah, don't be shy to connect for sure on LinkedIn, and follow me too, because you'll see some interesting posts. And some are more entertaining than others, but yeah, definitely don't hesitate to connect for sure. And Yevgeny, I just want to thank you again for having me on. It's been, again, knowing this is my second time, still just a humbling experience to be able to share my knowledge with folks and hopefully help people land that job they want to land.
Yeah. Thank you very much. All right, guys. Awesome. Thank you. I'll see you next time.